You are an entrepreneur, a business owner, or somebody out there who has a big idea, and you're wondering, how do I take this big idea and launch it to the world? Well, today we're going to be talking with an expert who knows just how to do that based on his vast experience speaking with successful people, working with business owners, working with entrepreneurs, but also because of his own unique story that we're going to dive into and his own methodology that he calls idea climbing. Today, we're going to speak with Mark J. Carter to help you to launch your next big idea. But you know the fee for the show. When you take away any piece of value, any piece of advice, a new philosophy that helps you personally or professionally, share this show with one person who could use it as well. Share it with one person who you know it will help. That's how we've been able to grow, because of your support, because you are a part of the team. So without further ado, let's talk to our guest expert, Mark J. Carter. And for those who don't know Mark believes that mentoring is crucial to our professional lives, yet it's an ambiguous process that can leave people confused rather than inspired. After 20 years of interviewing successful people from all walks of life, he created his concept of idea climbing, a body of work that demystifies mentoring and helps people to solve problems through collaboration and relationship marketing. Recently, Mark served as a mentor at one of Chicago's largest startup incubators. He launched Loyola University's Quinlan School of Business's inaugural mentoring program, and he's created a semester of mentoring for Columbia University in New York. Mark works with clients to create outreach and mentoring programs that create marketing results. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm curious, let's just dive right into it. Where did the significance of mentoring come into your life? What has made mentoring so significant for you, and how did that begin?
My senior year of college, I started to read self-help books, and one of them was by Tony Robbins, and he described his lifestyle about being a coach and a consultant, and it just sounded so much better than sitting in a cubicle every day. So I struck out on my own, quit my corporate job, went back to waiting tables to pay the rent. And I didn't call it mentoring. I didn't even know I was doing it at the time, but I would seek out people smarter than me, more successful than me, and I would talk to them 20 minutes on the phone, coffee, lunch, whatever they would give me. And the key is I would get at least one actionable idea from the conversation, not just talk about their life, but how did you find a mentor? How did you become CEO? How did you start a business? What contributed to your success? And then I would build that into my own life and my own business world. And that has changed everything because I wasn't figuring it out on my own. I felt like I had support through the entire process.
Did you have fear when it came to you approaching these different successful individuals that you were talking to at first? Like what were some of the internal struggles, if any, at that point in time?
Ignorance is bliss. I didn't know I was supposed to be scared. So I just approached anyone. I mean, I made a website, I made my own business card. And even waiting tables, if people came in, like the first two, I still have my notebook from 1999. The first two interviews I did were guests that came into the restaurant. One was University of Michigan's head basketball coach. Another was a Grammy award-winning musician. And here's my card. And I tell them, I'm starting my own business. I want to learn how you created success at a young age, or with the basketball coach, how do you motivate teams? I would find something that was unique to them. Not the same question to everyone. The coach motivating teams, a musician got famous at a young age. How did you discover your passion and then make a living from it? And I would do that with them. And yeah, like I said, I didn't know I was supposed to be scared. I just did it.
I love that, man. I know. I don't know. Since I was young, like I've had this thing, like when I knew I was talking to a successful person, and much, much less now. Sometimes like when I speak to big authors, even on the show, I'll get a little intimidated until about 10 minutes into the conversation. And then it's very natural at that point. But I know there's people listening who are like, well, where am I going to find these successful people? Which is something that I'll ask you. But like, I know that some others might have that feeling of, well, who am I to walk up to them? But the thing is, and I'm sure you'd agree, a lot of these successful people, they wanted to help you, right? So how did you find them, and what was their overall demeanor when it came to giving you advice and helping you when it came to starting your own business?
At first, it was what I mentioned, guests in the restaurant, and also I started using the internet, and I would do cold outreach. And I knew I wanted to be, like I said, author, speaker, coach, consultant, something along those lines. So I would Google something like, New York Times bestselling author or sales coach. And at first it was very cold outreach, and I had a good response. People made time for me. I remember one of them was America's #1 sales coach. And he asked, do you mind if I eat? He was in a hotel room on the road speaking, and he ate breakfast while he talked to me. I didn't care. I got 30 minutes of this guy's time. It was amazing. He gave me the format for a speech that I actually used and got paid for, and he just gave it to me. So a lot of it was just cold outreach. And then I started networking in Chicago in 2002, 2003. And that's when the game changed, because I would go to events and I would always hit up whoever was speaking and the sponsors, and whoever was in the room was just gravy. But I would always, if I had to go backstage or sneak around to get to the speaker, if it was a big name, I'd do it. And the key with asking is that I would give what I mentioned before. I would give something specific to them. Here's why I'm asking you, not just, and I never asked anyone, will you be my mentor? I'm against that. Let it happen organically if it does. Because if you ask, it's like asking someone to marry you on a first date. It's awkward. It's too much of a commitment. It's no, but just say, here's why I want to talk to you. And a key that I found over the years was adding the words, even if it's just 20 minutes on a phone call, or nowadays a Zoom call. Because it's so easy to see, in 20 minutes, call me at noon on Friday. If you just say, especially if the world gets back to somewhat normal, when I was going to live events and I would meet someone local, can I ask you for some advice? Meant that even if they could walk, I'm in downtown Chicago, even if they walked from their office to a coffee shop, 15 minutes each way, which is 30 minutes. If in-person meetings go for an hour, so you're asking for 90 minutes of their time as opposed to just 20 minutes on the phone. Changes the game with people saying yes to you.
Exactly. You were very intentional about your going up to people and asking them for advice. You knew exactly what you wanted help with. You told them this is only going to take a couple minutes of your time. Like, you made it very easy for them to let their guard down and actually have that conversation with you, where I'll be on Instagram and I'll even see people comment under like some influencers, and they'll say things like, can you mentor me, please? Like you just said, you never ask that question because like in their mind, that's like, okay, huge time commitment. It's just not feasible. You knew exactly what you wanted help with from these individuals, but I'm sure that you gave to them at the same time in some capacity, which I want to talk to you about. But my question is, what were some of the commonalities, especially at the beginning, when you knew that you wanted to be a coach, author, consultant, whatever it was? When you talked to these successful people, what were some of the things that all of them had in common that you began to pick up on?
The most successful people, it was building relationships. That was everyone. Two things really that stand out. One, what we just spoke about, mentoring, whether they called it an advisor, a coach, a mentor, they all had that kind of experience. And then relationships. When I was running book tours, one of the tours was for a New York Times bestselling author. And we made it look easy only because he had decades of relationships with top people that could buy 500 books or pay whatever for a speaking engagement or a keynote speech. And that's one thing that all of them had, was they built relationships. And that's one of the first things I learned from them was, how do I build relationships? I could be the most popular guy in the room and be broke. And I could also be, oh God, here he comes. He's gonna, I don't want to buy insurance today. No. I didn't want to be that guy, but there was a middle ground that people that were successful walked, and they did it by giving as much as they got, if not more.
That's the biggest difference, because you and I met through Megan Robinson. And I didn't know who you were before then, right? Megan's like, you need to meet this guy, Mark J. Carter. He would be a perfect guest for your show. And I was like, I wonder what he's all about. And then I saw that you have a very interesting system that you've created, which you've coined idea climbing, which is super cool. And what I find fascinating is at the beginning, you didn't have the concrete idea already created for exactly what kind of business you wanted to create, what kind of book you wanted to write. You simply said, I want to go talk to a lot of different successful people and just pick their brain on their own story with intention, with telling them how long it would take. So you didn't have everything fleshed out before you started. And I feel that, and what I find with even a lot of my clients is, before they even really begin to take action, they feel that they have to have their idea completely fleshed out before they take action. But do you believe it's the opposite? Do you believe that it comes down to building relationships before the idea can even take life?
building relationships will create the idea. It'll help clarify it, even if, and I had to pivot from the meetings and events industry when the pandemic hit, like so many other people had to do. And I found by talking about idea climbing, I honed my pitch. It wasn't role play, it was real. I had to explain to people what idea climbing was. And because I had to explain it, when I got a good response, I'd keep that explanation. Then I'd tweak it a little, tweak it a little, tweak it a little, but only because I was talking to people. If I would have waited until it was perfectly explained, I wouldn't be on your show right now talking about it. I'd still have this great idea for a book in my head. I'd still have this great idea for using this trademark name I have, idea climbing, because I wanted to make it perfect. I put it out there as soon as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And at some point you said to yourself, wow, I love you. Really, what you did is you took the process that you went through, all the years of you networking and building business relationships and seeking out mentors and conversations. And you took that and you streamlined it into your own proprietary system, which is idea climbing, which is what your future book is all about, which we'll be talking about here. What is this concept of idea climbing? And when, by the way, kind of a two-part question, when did it click for you where you're like, this is the idea? Like what I've been doing all this time is what I've been meant to create and put out into the world, at least at this chapter and point in your life. When did that happen? And what is this concept all about?
Great question. I have huge Post-it notes on my wall from presentations. When I really hit it, I saved the whiteboard and put it up on my wall in my office. And I have one that says 2016 book, Saturday, 3/12/16, 5:28 p.m. is when I first outlined the book.
Wow.
And I'm glad no one told me, don't worry, in 5 years, you have a really good book. It's like, no, no, not cool. That's a long time. But I had to go through notebooks of my first conversations. Were the first like 15 years were all in paper notebooks.
Wow.
So it was great because I learned a lot. It was tedious. And then I had to find the commonalities like mentoring. Okay, that's got to be in the book. Relationship marketing definitely has to be in the book. And I started, when I would interview people, when I'd find like mentoring, then I have it on my YouTube station and my podcast now, I would intentionally do a deeper dive and say, well, I'm going to interview you about mentoring. So I put all the pieces together, said this is a common thread, relationship marketing, building relationships, networking, whatever you want to call it. And then I would find experts and go into a deep dive and say, we're going to talk about relationship marketing. We're going to talk about networking. We're going to talk about marketing in general. And I would add that to the book. And that's where a lot of the stories came from. It was either someone I interviewed or I learned vicariously from based on their biography or autobiography.
So these, in a sense, you going through all the notes that you took while you were speaking with these people, and by the way, awesome. Some of the most successful people I've met and the most ambitious people I've met, they always have a notebook with them and they're always writing. Like even during this conversation, I have half a page of notes just based on what you're saying so that I don't miss certain points. But I literally have, and I'm sure it's the same for you, probably at a much greater scale, I literally have bookshelves. And the bottom shelf of it is just full of all my notebooks, all my journals that I've taken over the course of years. And it does take something special to go through them. I mean, with intention of you knowing you wanted to write a book, you probably took them, went through them, and that gave you the idea, I'm assuming here, that gave you the different pillars that have to do with idea climbing. So that's what the outline, that's how it took form.
That's how the 8 pillars came into fruition. I didn't know what I was going to write because some books that you read, they're from one person's perspective, so you can sit in front of a computer and write. This one, I couldn't just say, oh, this is a pillar. I had to find the pillars. I had to go through the notes and have those aha moments of, okay, this is the 10th time that mentoring has come up. I think there's something there. Then, like I said, I would do a deeper dive. Collaborative cohorts, people would build these groups of support system of friends and mentors and referral sources, whatever it might be. Some of the most successful people had that. So, okay, collaborative cohorts goes into the book as one of the pillars. And it was an awesome, like I said, it took a long time, but it was a very awesome learning experience for me because you forget like 80% of what you hear within 72 hours or something like that. So going through that many notes from that many meetings, I learned a lot from doing it.
I bet you learned even more when you were actually going back over all the notes that you took during those sessions.
And now we're in the first stage of editing the book, and I'm learning more because the editor is going through word for word. I mean, we're changing like an apostrophe here. So now I'm doing a deeper dive into it. Like, I just want it done.
It's exciting though, just seeing what you've built, and it's going to be I mean, you're taking decades of your life and condensing it into something that someone can read, depending on how fast they read, in a weekend or a week or a couple of weeks or whatever it is. I mean, it's just powerful because you really are the example of what this whole process of idea climbing is. You did it yourself, and that's how you came across this system. Let's talk to the entrepreneur who's watching right now. And let's talk about the person who is newer in business. They are finding their footing. They're creating the next idea. They're looking to create a product. Based on the concept of idea climbing, how would this apply to the newer entrepreneur, and where should they begin with this process?
I would say two things. One, I guess internal might be the word, but for yourself, the mentors, without a doubt. Talk to people who've done, if you want to write a book, talk to authors. You want to be a speaker, talk to speakers. You want to be a CEO, talk to CEOs, and ask them how they got where they are. Not just the story. The key word here is how. When you ask someone, how did you become a CEO? How did you start your own business? The word how elicits a story. And everyone, they love to read stories, learn from stories, hear stories. And by saying, how did you do it? You also will probably get some actionable advice. The second thing for the external, if you will, or what I call relationship marketing, start going to, now it's virtual, which makes it easier. Go to a ton of events that have breakout rooms if they're using Zoom, which most of them are these days. And going to that forces you, there's usually 3 to 4 people in a room, maybe 5. And you have to give an elevator pitch, if you want to call it that, whatever you value proposition, whatever you might call it. But
what was your elevator pitch at the beginning? What did that sound like for you? How did you come across it?
How did I come across what?
Your elevator pitch, because that's one thing for a lot of people when they go to networking events. It's very difficult for them to really talk about what they do. How did you craft that on your own? Like, was that even a struggle for you?
Oh, a huge struggle. And what I came up with is listing a problem that I solve. So telling a story, instead of trying to explain what I do and how I do it, I now call it complaining over coffee. If I get a referral, it doesn't matter if I was CEO of a tech company that's 10 million in revenue. People go about business that way for referrals. Well, if that CEO doesn't have a problem you can solve, it's a useless referral and you're wasting their time. So I go for the complaining over coffee. And when I started saying things like, I'd love to meet entrepreneurs, they're pivoting, change is being forced on them, or they're choosing to change something in their business, pivoting, launching a new product or service, need to get more referrals. Those are the people that I can help with idea climbing. And I do it mostly through relationship marketing and mentoring experiences. So technically, that was like, 2 sentences of what I do. The rest was all a problem I can solve. And the referrals are so much better because people, oh, my friend was just complaining over coffee with that. If they're venting about it, they want this problem to go away, and they're primed if I have the solution to do it. Not, here's my target market, who do you know?
I love that. And when you were joining, well, it wasn't breakout rooms for you at this time. It was, you were in person talking to people, but now in the virtual world, when you're joining these networking events, which are so valuable, by the way, it's the reason I met you. I met Megan through, I forget because the chain becomes so long, but I met Megan through somebody that I met at a networking event. I think it was through Tony P with his networking group.
Okay, yeah.
And I wouldn't have met any of you if it wasn't for that group. But for someone who says to themselves, well, I don't really see the value, or what's the value in joining these networking groups? Like, for these newer entrepreneurs, what should their objective be when they're joining these different, even virtual networking groups and being put in the breakout room? What should that look like at the beginning?
The first objective, if they're new, they're probably honing that value proposition, is to practice that. And you get real world feedback. If someone leans in and says, tell me more, you said something right. You got to get that down first. What's your value proposition? What problem do you solve for people? How can you get that across in 30 to 60 seconds? That would be the first thing to do. Secondly, if someone does fall into the niche that you're looking for, like with mine, entrepreneurs and privately held company owners, build relationships with them. Don't try and sell them right away. I get it. It can happen. It's happened to me. It is not the norm. So many people go in, it's like job hunters. They carry a stack of resumes. I just met you. How am I going to refer you to a job? Or as an entrepreneur, you have to sell your product or service. And I focus on B2B companies in the service industry. When I go to those networking events, some people, I'm a coach. And if I don't respond that I want to hire them, they don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
It's just churn and burn. And that's the worst way to do it. Go in with, I know this person could be a client someday or a referral source. Meet them, find out what they're working on and who they need to know, and do your best. One of the first things you can do is make an introduction for them, just like you and I met.
Yeah. 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 That's the thing, man. A lot of people out there, especially new to the game, you'll ask them what they do and they say, I'm a coach. And it's like, okay, so are you a baseball coach? Are you a soccer coach? And they're like, no, I'm a life coach. And it's like, okay, so what part of life? Like you said, what is the specific problem that you solve? And then don't just tell people you're a coach. Say to somebody something like, just off the top of my head, like, I help CEOs to better organize their personal life, who are very busy in their business and they need help organizing their personal life. Then you might say, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. And now you're actually having a conversation. It's all about that problem that you solve. I'm curious for you specifically, when you first started going to networking meetings, before you even had the idea for idea climbing, what was the problem that you solved? Or were you there just to begin building relationships and that was your sole focus?
When I started in Michigan and in college, I technically was networking. I just didn't know it. I got my first 2 jobs from friends. I didn't call it networking. It just happened. Mm-hmm. So technically I never went to a single networking event in Michigan. When I came to Chicago, I was a results coach, life coach, whatever you want to call it, because that's what Tony Robbins was. So I figured it's a good career path. And in Michigan, I did cold calling. And I realized cold calling is not going to work in Chicago. No way. And I started interviewing, and now I would call it being mentored. I found people that talked about building relationships. I read Crane Chicago Business. And if someone said, oh, I got to the top by networking, I would reach out to that person. How did you network? How do you build relationships? And when I started going to networking events, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Honestly, I had no clue. All I knew is I had to go hand out my card and hopefully someone will hire me at some point. And I kept interviewing the successful people about that. And then I built relationships so well that people said, forget this results coaching. If you can teach my team, like mortgage, real estate, people that live and breathe based on referrals, if you can teach them what you're doing, I'll pay you for that. And that's when I shifted gears and doubled down and started learning even more about building relationships. And it took a couple of years, though. I mean, it was not like I went to 10 events and poof, magically I have the perfect value proposition and I'm getting hired on the spot.
It's a long game.
But it took some time.
Yeah, it's not something that just happened all of a sudden. I think it's cool how you went from, being kind of unsure of what you do as, a results coach, you going there, but then you slowly find your footing and start working with businesses to teach them what it is that you've learned through your steps in doing this. Mm-hmm. So at this point, you're building relationships. You are intentionally networking, which I think we've talked about this many times on the show, but you're intentionally going out there to meet and build relationships with new people. Once somebody's doing that, because this, by the way, this was me at the beginning of last year. Do you know Christine Smith? Have you ever met Christine?
I don't think so.
Oh man, I think you two, she's a connector over here in upstate New York. And that's just literally one part of what she does. She's just an incredible powerhouse of a human being. She's been on the show too. I'm going to connect the two of you. But I met Christine and she talked to me about exactly what you're talking about right now, the power of intentionally going out and meeting people. And I said, but what are we going to talk about, Christine? And she's like, you talk about them, you get to know them, you build relationships. And she's like, even if you can't help them in that moment or they don't have anything for you, that's okay. Like now you've got this person that who solves a certain problem. They know that you solve a certain problem. And now you can help each other to solve problems together. And I was like, that's pretty cool. So I started going to networking meetings and I never really understood the concept of intentionally doing this. But I will say my life and my business changed once I started going out there to actually meet successful people and intentionally have those conversations.
Well, one of the things I love is I call them interview projects or a catch-all. I need to meet somebody, especially now when I was 19 and going out and looking for mentors, everyone said yes because I was 19. They looked at me like a go-getter because most 19-year-olds don't do this. Oh, now I'm in my 40s. And especially if you're talking to somebody in a service position, you can't just ask for free coaching
Yeah.
or pick their brain. There's a certain age where you're not just picking their brain. And I stumbled across this. I did it with unconscious competence. I created interview projects, blogs, videos on YouTube, podcasts. So if I met someone, instead of saying, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes, I became, can I put you on my podcast? Basically make you sound like a genius. And by the way, and I stuck with it. It's 20 minutes. I've had one person say no, and the one person that said no had a death in the family, and obviously at that point, just let it go. But that's one of the biggest things I love to tell people, like secret sauce, interview them. Oh. Even if you write it, it's free, LinkedIn articles. Tell them you're going to share it with their network. You want to learn something, get some actionable advice. But that's one of the things I get really excited about, because when I realized that's what I'm doing, it's like, oh my God,
it's brilliant.
That's a strategy.
It's brilliant.
And everyone says yes. It's nuts.
I've spoken to some really, I mean, everyone I've talked to on this podcast has been a cool, interesting person, but I've spoken to some people out there who are making big moves in business. And if I had gone and approached them, like you just mentioned, hey, can I pick your brain? It would have been a no. But when you say, hey, I'd love to have you on my show, or I'd love to talk to you and write an article about what we talk about to help other people, these big names, like if they're just talking to you and helping you, it's not nearly as advantageous to them, because they want not just more notoriety, not just more money per se. These people want more impact, especially if they're at a particular chapter of their life. They want to reach more people. And if you can help them to reach more people by having them on the show or an article or a blog post, whatever it is, then it makes you it makes it a lot more tempting for them to want to give you your time. So I think that piece of advice right there is, if you just take that, guys, no matter what it is you're looking to do, if you're looking to be a successful coach, speak with really successful coaches and write about it and post about it. Mm-hmm. Just spoke with this person today. These were my top takeaways. If you want to be, like you said, a CEO, interview CEOs. When you say to people, I actually just heard Gary Vee say this too, I'd love to have you on my show to talk about your story and how you've got to where you were. We all have ego, and 99% of people are going to be like, yeah, sounds good. I'd love to come on your show and talk about myself. And then it gives you an opportunity to not just network with that person, but to pick their brain and also help other people at the same time. That's valuable.
That's exactly. I mean, the bookends of my YouTube station, the first video was the founder of TED. The last one I did was Bo Jackson, if you're into sports.
Wow.
And but because I had the founder of TED was share some genius about the meetings and events industry, and I'm going to share that with other meeting professionals. Bo Jackson was mentoring. He was a judge at a cooking competition. One of my friends was running it. I just said, my videos are 8 unedited minutes. Can I get 15 minutes of his time? They said yes. It never hurts to ask. But it was also not, can I sit with him privately and pick his brain for 15 minutes? It was, can I record something and share his genius afterwards, so it becomes almost a legacy video, as opposed to just, okay, he sat down with me for 15 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I love it. It's so powerful. So once you're having these conversations with these successful people and any people in business that are solving a problem, now that you're networking, you're putting yourself out there, what would you say is the next most important pillar of idea climbing?
I would say what we were talking about was newer entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. The next one would be to actually create your compass, know what direction you're moving in and why, and get specific. Because once you have your value proposition down, you get comfortable with networking, maybe you're doing interview projects. Entrepreneurs can go in 10 different directions any given day. It's creating a compass of, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a public speaker. Oh, that means I need to speak to Rotary clubs and entrepreneurial organizations. Is entirely different than I want to be a super successful life coach, or I want to sell widgets. Create a compass and then follow your compass and know why you're doing what you're doing. When working with clients, that's usually one of the first things that comes up is we create the compass. That's the first part of the workbook. Once they realize what their compass is and the direction they need to move in, they almost always say, you know what, I can drop at least one event a week. Why am I going to an event with 26 different industries when all I work with is entrepreneurs? That makes no sense. And when it was in person, that gave them 90 minutes a week or 2 hours a week sometimes back into their schedule, and they got focused. If I go to an event, if I work with entrepreneurs, even a virtual one, I'm going to go where the solopreneurs, entrepreneurs are, not 26 different industries. If I was selling insurance, 26 different industries, that's probably a good event. You never know who needs insurance. But if you have a niche and you serve a niche and you know you serve that niche, go where they are. But you only can do that if you create a compass to guide you along the way.
How did you choose your compass? Because that's that, and create your compass, but really it's choosing the direction you want to go when there's so many different ones to go in. Like, let's talk about that coach that we were just talking about before. How does that coach choose a specific niche? Because then they're going to say, well, I can help anybody. And we talk about this all the time. If you say you can help anybody, you're in effect helping nobody, because you're trying to reach too many types of different people rather than becoming an expert in one specific segment of the industry. So how did you, because I mean, was it easy for you to create your compass? Was it easy for you to choose what direction you wanted to go in?
I went where I got the best feedback. The first person for not the consulting, but for the results coaching that shifted and said, if you can teach my people how to get referrals, I'll pay you. I figure if someone's coming to me and asking me that, that's the problem I solve. Okay, I'll teach that. I kind of went where people came to me and what resonated most with them. When I was a results coach, it didn't work because it was what you said. I didn't have a niche. I tried to be everything to everybody, and it just didn't work. And if you're doing it yourself to be insightful, what problem do you solve? And more importantly, who do you love to work with? So many people miss that. And it sounds like this hokey question, but it's so true. If you love working with entrepreneurs, find a way to serve them. If you love working with HR people, find a way to serve them. But you have to find some kind of a niche. Like you mentioned with the life coach, if that person works with CEOs to help them organize their thoughts and have a structure to their day, that gives me, oh, I know someone that needs that. As opposed to who do you work with? Anyone with money? I hate that answer. Some people will say this. You just said that? No, come on.
And it's like they don't even really mean that. It's just something that they say because they think that that's the right answer.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. Do you think knowing who you want to help even comes before knowing what problem you solve for that group of people?
In hindsight, yes.
Wow.
I think I stumbled into it, and I didn't have the niche of entrepreneurs. And then when I got in the meetings and events industry for 10 years, it was a whole different ballgame with creating conferences, booking speakers, running book launches and book tours. And now with Idea Climbing, I'm back into entrepreneurs, privately held company owners. And I do that because on my side, I looked at who has skin in the game. If I give a great consulting project, let's just say Accenture, it looks good on the website. Don't get me wrong. But the person who hired me has the same salary, the same job. And when I'm done. And they move on. Entrepreneurs and privately held company owners have skin in the game. They get excited about it. If we do something good, that directly affects their bottom line. They're going to keep me around longer and want to work with me because they get excited, as opposed to just, I have a request for a proposal. I'm going to narrow it down to 3 people. I'm going to hire one of them. There's no skin in the game. They're spending somebody else's money on top of it. It looks good as a testimonial on the website. So it took me a while to get over that and just realize I like the people I want to work with. I'm not going to go after the Fortune 500.
And the thing is, too, just based on your story, you didn't know exactly at first who that person was until you started to work with different types of people to really discover what that was. Like, even with me, I started with I help anybody, and I was creating content that helps anybody. And then it more broadly became salespeople specifically coming to me for help because I talked about sales a lot because I came from the world of sales. So your experience from your past can come into this as well. And I started to help salespeople. So then I started to work with, salespeople who worked with companies. I started working with 1099 contractors. I started working with life coaches and small business owners. And I really enjoyed working with new coaches and online business owners the most because I vibed with them the most. I shared a lot of the challenges that they faced at the beginning of my journey, but I didn't know that that was the type of person that I wanted to work with
Mhm.
until I started working with a bunch of different people. You really have to dip your toes in the water and see what you resonate most with and see really also who you get the best results for.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I
Definitely.
like it. So let's recap a little bit of what we have here so far. So for those entrepreneurs listening who have that next big idea, go out there, speak to successful people who've already done what you're looking to do. Intentionally network with other people in your field, outside your field. It's great to know people. It's great to know their stories, how they got to where they are, because when they find someone that you can help based on the problem you solve, they're going to refer them to you, especially if you put work into building that relationship and connecting them with other people. And then we have the idea of, okay, great. Now let's go out there, find who we like to work with by working with a bunch of different people and solve their problems. So you've mentioned content marketing, and I know there's a lot of other pillars. Is there one more pillar that we have to know now in order to really tie all these things together, or something that will accelerate our progress?
It's more of a recap in the book of the chapters, tying it all together is once you realize this, create a strategy. Get strategic about what you're doing. Don't just say, oh, I need to know entrepreneurs. I'll go to an event. What events you're going to track. I have an Excel spreadsheet because it's the easiest thing to use. I also have a CRM, but I track my conversations and who should I reach out to? Who do I need to keep the conversation going with? It's definitely get strategic about it. And as strategic as you can, do that. And one thing, just to put it out there with networking, also think about who knows the people that you need to know. I've had a lot of success with people who aren't entrepreneurs, but a banker who works with entrepreneurs could give me 10 referrals as opposed to one entrepreneur becoming one client. I could get 10 referrals from somebody who works with entrepreneurs. So think about that too, is not just who can you sell to, but who knows the people that you need to know, because that's a huge difference of trying to pitch yourself versus trying to show your value and get them to say, oh, you know what? One of my clients who's an entrepreneur needs help building relationships. Let me refer you to him or her.
Yeah. A lot of what you talk about comes down to just having clarity of what you're doing, what direction you're heading in, the type of people you want to help, and who it is that you want to meet. It's asking yourself the questions of who, what, where, when, why, but also not just saying, oh, there's so many different options, I'm just going to go with the flow. It's like, no, if you go with the flow, you're going to find yourself in a bunch of different directions. Choose one, go down that path, and then see what life puts in front of you for opportunities and go based off of that. But in order to really even get started, you got to start having conversations. And like you just said, you've got to be strategic about this thing, especially if you're going into business. Like, it's a lot harder to be in business than it is to work for a company and then, work there forever, get your 401k and just do that. And by the way, that's honorable as hell. But for those listening who are entrepreneurs and business owners, you've got to be clear of what you want. You've got to be strategic. You've got to build these relationships. And that's a big reason why I wanted to talk to you, Mark, because this concept of idea climbing is really a blueprint to find success in the creative world of business and entrepreneurship is really what it is.
Definitely.
From what I've seen. Now, your book is in the first round of editing right now. It's launching. Is it still scheduled to launch in late 2022?
It's gonna depend on who else is launching books. If Tony Robbins is dropping a book that month, I'm not competing. I'm not even gonna pretend. It's like, no, we can wait a month. Yep. So it'll either be late 2022 for the holidays and gifts, or it'll be early 23 because the whole New Year's resolution things and people are setting goals. And it also depends how long the editing takes, which they don't think it'll take that long, but we're on about a 6-month timeline, and then we decide when we hit that timeline.
Very cool. I'm excited for you, brother. And what I'm going to say to everyone is can I share the name of the book, or could you share the name of the book? I won't take it out of your mouth.
It's the title. Well, I'm going with the brand because I own the trademark on idea climbing. And then the tagline is how to build a support system for your next big idea.
Oh, I love it. I love just the clarity that took years for you to really create this system just based on your own experience. And now, like I said, you're taking it and you're giving it to all these new business owners and entrepreneurs out there. So guys, what I recommend to you is go to the link in the description, follow Mark on LinkedIn. You're going to have his LinkedIn there. I'll also put his other social profiles there and stuff like that too. The website that'll be in the description. Follow Mark. so that you can keep up to date with this book. You can continue watching any shows he's on, all the content he produces, all those things. My final question for you, Mark, is what are you looking to accomplish in this next chapter of your life? Like, what is the reason for what you're doing as we move forward into this year and beyond?
For the second half of my life, it's idea climbing, but the reason why is that if I would have had the blueprint when I was 19, my life would be dramatically different right now. Dramatically different. And I want someone to be able to say, I have a successful business, or I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a CEO because of idea climbing. That's what I wanted to, is to have other people start their stories with, I read idea climbing, or I heard about it, or, who knows what online courses are in the mix for the future. That's really what I want to do. Is I wish I had it when I was younger. I wish I had it when I started a business. I wouldn't have had to stumble through things and figure it out on my own.
Yeah. They're not teaching these things, man. So I love what you're doing, because you literally are giving the blueprint to this next generation of business owners with all the tools at their disposal. And this book is literally going to be the structure that ties all of it together for them.
That's exactly it.
I love it. Mark, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I'm glad that we finally made it work. And I'm really looking forward to see where you go on your journey and to see all the success that you have with idea climbing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone, links are in the description for you to go check out Mark's profiles, his website, so that you can follow him and keep up to date with everything that he's doing with idea climbing, building a support system for your next big idea. As always, if you found any value in the show, share the show with one person who could use it the most. Our show has grown so much because you're part of the team and because what you've done to help support us. And for that, I'm grateful. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.